Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with David Kaplan, Executive Director of the Cape and Islands Theater Coalition. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And also Pat Barnhart, who is President of the Friends of the Cape and Islands Theater Coalition. Pat, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here, to both of you. I want to start with, for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with the Theater Coalition, David, can you give us an overview of what the Theater Coalition is?
Sure, happy to. The Theater Coalition is an association of the 26 nonprofit live theaters on the Cape and Islands, and one in Wareham, actually, defining the Cape a little broader. And what we do is really work to support those theaters and to promote theater in general across the Cape and Islands. And we do that through routine marketing, such as our theater guide, which I think most people are familiar with. That goes out to over 125,000 households and tourists while they're here on the Cape each year. And we have meetings with all the theaters to discuss areas of mutual concern, opportunities, etc., and then attend conferences. We hold our annual Gala, which is coming up October 13th, and that's going to be exciting. We can talk a little bit more about that later. So that's kind of the basics of what the Theater Coalition does.
And what's the history of this organization? How did it get started? Because I think it's relatively new. Is that right?
It's relatively new. This is actually the 20th anniversary year. Was started in 1995 and was started through the initiative of 5 of the theaters. So there were 5 original members. And also with the help of the Cape Cod 5 Bank Foundation, the Cape Cod 5 Bank, and David Willard from the Cape Cod 5 Bank. So it was really through their support that they were able to facilitate the founding of the coalition and with these 5 theaters.
Do you know offhand who those original members were?
I believe I do, actually. The Academy Playhouse, Chatham Drama Guild, Cape Rep Theater, which I think the very first year was actually called the Cape Rep Outdoor Theater. I don't think the indoor theater was functioning yet. That happened in the next year. Harwich Junior Theater, and Wellfleet Harbor Actors Theater in Wellfleet.
Some of the very prominent theaters on the Cape that are all really still going and very, very healthy organizations.
That's right. Yeah.
And now, Pat, how did you get involved, and how did the Friends organization start?
Well, we started in about 4 years ago. Actually, we launched in 2012 in October. David Kaplan had approached me and a group of friends and colleagues who've had worked together on some other projects in the past, and he thought we might be able to offer some help to the Theater Coalition by developing a Friends organization. And so we did. And it took us a little while to figure out what our mission was, but once we did, we were off and running. And basically our mission is to help raise public awareness about all of the live theaters that we have on the Cape, the richness of theater, and to provide some fun activities to get people to attend performances.
Now, are you someone who participates in community theater on stage or backstage or in the audience?
Well,
which is also
it depends on how we define that. Not really, but I have had 2 opportunities to be a walk-on at the Cotuit Center for the Arts, but that was from a charity purchase. But no, I think I might have been an aspiring actress a long time in my past, but not currently.
But we know that audience members are really just as much a part of participation in community theater. Is one of the most important elements.
Absolutely.
Very much a part of that. Now, what are the different organizations that are in the Theater Coalition? Because there's quite a number of them when you consider we only have 15 towns here on the Cape and the 2 islands. Who's in the group?
Well, there are 26 members. I'm happy to read them off for you if you'd like.
Oh, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can do that alphabetically, actually, because we have a cheat sheet here. The Academy Playhouse.
And that's in Orleans,
That's
of course.
in Orleans, yep. Barnstable Comedy Club, which is in Barnstable Village.
Long-time theater and maybe one of the oldest community theaters on the Cape.
Yeah, and our newest member, actually, so surprisingly enough. Buzzards Play Productions, they're in Wareham. Cape Cod Community College Theater Program, and they've got a wonderful program there, and they're a member.
And I should say Buzzards Play, I think, is maybe the newest theater group on the Cape. That's a very new one, so it's great that these groups are still forming.
Right, absolutely. Cape Cod Theater Project, which is in Falmouth, and helps develop playwrights and new plays.
That's a summer program that does readings, and then they really use equity actors, and it's a very sophisticated program.
Yes. The Cape Playhouse, which I think perhaps is the most famous theater on Cape Cod and one of the original summer theaters.
I think they say that that's the oldest, as they call it, straw hat theater in America, that really has a rich history with people talk about Betty Davis and other famous stars that started there as ushers and also early performances on stage.
That's right.
Absolutely. Cape Rep Theater, which we already mentioned, that's in Brewster. Chatham Drama Guild. College Light Opera Company, and they're in Falmouth.
That's the summer program at Highfield Theater, and that's college students performing. And this is amazing. There's two groups on the Cape, college students that perform really a different show every week, and I'm blown away by the quality of these performances and that they can do a fully realized production. They're getting it. They're rehearsing one while they're performing the other.
Right. They're not the only theater
the
that
other
does
one
that.
Is
Monomoy does the same thing.
Monomoy does it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cotuit Center for the Arts.
Very, very established theater now, and really one of the go-to places for community theater on the Cape.
Right, and also where the Theater Gala on October 13th will be held this year.
Okay.
Elements Theater Company, they're also in Orleans. Eventide Theater Company, which is the Gertrude Lawrence Stage in Dennis Village. Falmouth Theater Guild. Harbor Stage Company, which is another new, I think this is probably their third or fourth year performing on the Cape.
And I should give a little plug for Falmouth Theater Guild because they're going on 60 years on the Cape performing theater at Highfield Theater in Falmouth. And their season, I think, is September to May, and then College Light Opera Company takes over Highfield Theater in the summer.
We have Harwich Junior Theater, which actually they just changed their name to Cape Cod Theater Company, home of Harwich Junior Theater. They're in Harwich, obviously. Island Theater Workshop of Martha's Vineyard. They're in Oak Bluffs on Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard Playhouse in Vineyard Haven. Monomoy Theater, which we just talked about, in Chatham. Payamet Performing Arts Center. They're in Payamet on an old Army base. And
out in Truro.
Do a lot of music, but still do plays, which is great. Peregrine Theater Ensemble, they're in Provincetown. They're relatively new as well and are starting to do work in the old Provincetown High School. Provincetown Tennessee Williams Theater Festival, which just concluded this past weekend. And that's a 5-day festival of Tennessee Williams plays, other plays that have sort of evolved from Tennessee Williams' work, and a lot of parties and fun. The Provincetown Theater, another long-established theater with roots. It's not a continuous line, but with roots really back to
Eugene O'Neill.
Eugene O'Neill, exactly, and that was 100 years ago. And, of course, also Tennessee Williams and others who've worked and lived in Provincetown. Theater Workshop of Nantucket. The Wellfleet Harbor Actors Theater, which we've also mentioned. White Heron Theater Company, and they're a new company on Nantucket.
Yep.
And they are building a new theater. So that's, again, an exciting development. Woods Hole Theater Company, which is a true community theater. And I think that's all 26.
Yeah, so a great group, a really interesting group of theaters. I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with David Kaplan, Executive Director of the Cape and Islands Theater Coalition, and Pat Barnhart, who is President of the Friends of the Cape and Islands Theater Coalition. Now, let's talk about your big event that's coming up. This is a gala. This is an annual fundraiser for the Theater Coalition. What's going to be going on? Where and when is it?
Well, it's very exciting. It's October 13th at Cotuit Center for the Arts 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., and there's sort of three components to it. One is reception. The next is presentations and celebration of the 20th anniversary, and then performances from 6 theaters. And we're very excited about it, particularly with the 20th anniversary celebration. And it's really a time it is a fundraiser for the Theater Coalition, but it's also a time just to celebrate theater. A lot of people from the theater community in the room, as well as the general public, people representing foundations and businesses across the Cape. So it's a big get-together to celebrate the richness of Cape Cod theater.
Now, how do people get tickets? Where are they available?
They're available through the Cotuit box office, so they can go to the Cotuit website and order online or call Cotuit, or just go to the box office during the day and get their tickets.
Now, we can tell from that list that you read out, community theater seems to be very vital here on the Cape and Islands. Would you say that's the case? Has it expanded?
Well, I think it is vital. It certainly has expanded. We've added new theaters, not lost any theaters in recent years, which I think is good news. There's such a large theater community. And so I think it's vital both to the quality of life of the Cape in the way that it engages people and entertains people, and also the economy of the Cape. It's an important component of the economy, certainly helps to attract tourism, which then spills over to lodging, restaurants, all other portions of the Cape economy.
And many people might not realize, and Pat, you can maybe speak to this, that these theaters, the community theaters particularly, are ones that really entire families can get involved. They can audition for shows. If they don't get a part, they can work backstage. They often need volunteers. In fact, a number of these theaters are, I think, all volunteer organizations. Isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you mentioned something about families. Some of the theaters offer wonderful educational programs for young and old in theater design, set design, choreography, acting, all kinds of aspects of theater. So there's that component, too, which is something we also celebrate and encourage. When the Friends group began, there were 17 members. Now there are 26 are members. So I think there's a sense that the collaboration amongst all of the theaters and the volunteers who help and the public that supports it is just a tremendously wonderful thing here on the Cape. And friends of mine that live off Cape are often surprised to know that in an area that geographically is rather small, that we have such a great concentration of live theaters that offer all kinds of different programming.
It's really remarkable to have 26 theaters in this area, and some of them do use equity actors,
That's
professional actors, but many of them use really people from the community.
That's right.
You often have people who have been have acted earlier in their lives, and so they're coming back to the stage. But you also have people who've never been on stage before, have always wanted to.
Right. And we have a tremendous amount of talented people here, and every time I attend a performance or a performance that's a culmination of a season, such as what Cape Rep and other theaters do, I'm always struck by how multi-talented the performers are. They can sing, they can act, and do so many other things. It's really great.
People start going to a performance or two and they realize what richness we have here in theater, and it almost becomes a little bit of an addiction. You start really getting into
That's
it.
Right.
There are many people who don't realize what we have here for theater. That's why I wanted you to read out those names, David, that really we have it throughout the Cape, from the Upper Cape to the Outer Cape. And there are all these theaters performing, as you said, all year round.
Right.
And that's one thing to note, that this isn't just summer.
No, not at all. And I think David might want to comment on this more than I would. But American theater as we know it, live theater as we know it, was born here on Cape Cod about 100 years ago, right, David?
Right, exactly.
So we have a great history and something that, of course, affects the rest of the country and the world, because theater as we know it is all over.
People think of Eugene O'Neill as sort of the father of American theater, and he started, really as sort of a penniless artist, if you will, a writer out in Provincetown, living in a dune shack and writing plays that were performed out on a wharf in Provincetown with the fog rolling in off the seashore. So people do think of it as starting here on the Cape. Of course, Provincetown having this rich theater community for many years, but really, as you said, David, it's from one end of the Cape to the other, these different theaters.
Well, exactly. Certainly the rich history of many of the theaters, including something like the Cape Playhouse and the old Falmouth Playhouse, which burned down and went out of business not too long ago, but they were also part of the Straw Hat Circuit, I understand. So, and that's where I think Jimmy Stewart got his start. So there is a very interesting, rich history. But what's happening in the present is so fabulous, too, and just how many thousands of people are engaged by these theaters. And, of course, again, not to keep repeating myself, but, again, we're celebrating all of this on the 13th coming up at Katuitt, and we hope people can join us. I don't know if we have time to talk a little bit about who's going to be there and who will be performing.
Absolutely. Let's get right into that.
Okay, super. Well, performances are going to be from the 4 of the original 5 founding theaters, which we think is appropriate and fun. So that'll be the Academy of Performing Arts, Cape Rep Theater, Harwich Junior Theater, now Cape Cod Theater Company, home of Harwich Junior Theater, Watt. And then we'll also have Katuitt performing, the host theater, and our newest member, Barnstable Comedy Club. And so those will be the performances, and it's all going to be show tunes from South Pacific, Sweeney Todd, Oliver, a lot of fun, well-known shows. And then we'll also be honoring those 5 founding theaters, along with David Willard and the Cape Cod 5 Bank, the founding group. It'll be hosted by our State Senator Dan Wolf, and we'll have speakers such as Jung Ho Park and others who just are part of the arts and appreciate both the collaboration of all the theaters and the collaboration of the Cape Cod 5 Bank and others on the Cape who've helped support this effort over the years. And then just a big reception, complimentary wine, lots of hors d'oeuvres, and a good time.
Sounds like it's going to be
a very good time.
It's going to be a great event, it sounds like. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. I've been talking to David Kaplan, Executive Director of the Cape and Islands Theater Coalition, and Pat Barnhart, who is President of the Friends of the Cape and Islands Theater Coalition. Thank you both for being with me here today.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.